Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
Two Doomed Men podcast, the greatest, ready? The greatest podcast in the history of the country, perhaps even the world by far. I don't think anyone comes close.
What's up, Doom Nation? Welcome back. I hope everybody had a great Memorial Day weekend, but now it's back to reality, and you are listening to the Two Doom Men. As always, it's Skaggs and yours truly, the captain, and we have a returning guest, one of my favorite guests, Professor Giordano. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
Not too bad. Thank you for coming on. What's up, Skaggs? How you doing?
Could be better. Captain, I let Chris talk for himself, but we've been frustrated lately.
Yes.
And speaking of Memorial Day weekend, I was driving down to go hang out with Chris, and I put on your podcast, and you were talking about the one big beautiful bill, and I was like, oh, we should have him back on because he understands kind of the ins and outs of it. And this is the most boring topic to talk about, government spending, but I do think it's actually, ironically, kind of the most important thing. That they do. It's like everything is intertwined into these things at a fundamental level. So thank you for coming back on with us. Before we begin, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, what you do, easiest places.
Well, thanks for having me. Obviously, when it comes to the big, beautiful bill, it is big, beautiful, but there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's the podcast episode I did release on the P.A.S Report. Everyone can go to PASReport.com to check it out. And on all social media, more or less at P.A.S Report or some variation of it. I don't know. It's hard to keep up with all this.
Definitely. So I don't know. I mean, maybe let's start here. Chris, you weren't on the last episode. I had Andy Coons on. We were kind of both venting about how kind of disappointed we've been lately. The past couple weeks, I've been really disappointed in some of the things coming out of the Trump administration. My disappointment began kind of at the first continuing resolution, although that wasn't really Trump. That was the GOP. So my frustrations with all of them. Professor Giordano, what are your kind of thoughts, or how are you feeling so far, a couple months in here to the administration in general?
Well, I think that with any administration, they go in and you have high hopes that they're going to start responding to what the American people, the voters that put them there, want, and then you get disappointed when you see some of the opposite taking place. It's something that Republicans should be very, very familiar with because we've been down this road before plenty of times. And I think that as far as the Trump administration goes, I think they're doing a great job on a number of levels. But at the same time, I'm extraordinarily disappointed on two things in particular. One is the weaponization of government. I have not seen any real reforms coming out, particularly of the FBI and the Department of Justice. And I respect Kash Patel. I respect Dan Bongino. They are people that have spoken forcefully against government abuses over the past 5 years, but I haven't seen any type of real action since they've been in office. And they could continue to say, just give us a little time. We're going to get to it. We're going to release information. We're going to show you how the system was weaponized. But there's a number of things that they could do right away that shows that they're responding to what we put them in office for, right? I mean, you could reinstate whistleblowers that have been suspended for 3 years, had their security clearances revoked. They haven't been fired. They're only suspended, and that's a way to punish them. They can't go and get another job as they're suspended with the FBI. Release all the Russian collusion documents. President Trump actually declassified these the last month in office in 2020. And so just release those documents to the American people. Fire people that were involved in targeting parents at school boards. Fire the FBI supervisory special agent that was involved in the Catholic memo stating that traditional Catholics can be considered domestic violent extremists because they believe in two genders and they may be pro-life. And so those are the things that they take action right away. As far as weaponization of government, something that I've spoken about routinely, not just in the last 5 years, but over the course of the last decade and a half, is the idea that government has abused its power. It's gone well beyond its statutory authority. It's violated the Constitution. And what really annoyed me and aggravated me was in 2021, June of 2021, President Biden released the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism. I've spoken out forcefully against this document.
We had you on for
silent. And we're now seeing some information come out, mainly from Tulsi Gabbard over at ODNI. But the reality is that the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism has not been rescinded yet. And that should have been the first executive order to happen. So it leads me to believe, to a certain degree, that, hey, you know what? Republicans like power too. And they're going to take the tools that the previous administrations used, and they're going to use them and expand on them. And that's my concern. I don't care. It's not a Republican or Democrat thing to me. It's about preserving a system that has worked well for 200 years. And now in the last 40 years, we've kind of gone off the rails. And we could argue a little bit before the last 40 years. We could go back to FDR with that.
Yeah.
But the reality is that that's a disappointment I have. Another disappointment is in this big, beautiful bill. And there are a lot of elements that I support in the big, beautiful bill, right? I support making the tax cuts permanent. Anytime Americans get to keep more of their money that they actually earned, I'm for that. You want to do no tax on tips? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with no tax on overtime.
Real quick, are those actually in the bill this time? Because when they passed the continuing resolution last time, I remember people tweeting out, no taxes on overtime and no taxes on tips are in this. And I did a quick OCR and tried to search for these terms, and I couldn't find it. And then I saw it sort of community noting people. They're like, no, this is not actually in the bill. So I'm sitting there like, what the fuck? You guys passed this bill, and you can't just – this is a major point, but you're saying it is, but it's not. So
no, it's in the big, beautiful bill.
It's in this version. Okay.
If the bill passes as the House passed it last week, it is in that version. But the problem is going to be in the Senate. You may see some negotiation. I mean, listen, anytime that you're cutting off a revenue funding for the government, so taxes is how the government collects revenue. So now you're cutting off a revenue stream. Well, you either have to implement cuts to programs in order to balance that out, or you're going to start running deficits. And we got a $36.7 trillion debt that we have to start to tackle. So the no taxes, though, I do support because I believe that Americans work hard for their money, and therefore they should be able to keep as much as possible. Our government is too big, too bloated, too wasteful, too nefarious in a lot of ways. And so I don't like funding it. I'm trying to figure out a way for Suffolk Community College to pay me as tips rather than a salary. That would be very beneficial.
Only work overtime.
Not to get myself in trouble, but I'm also thinking about the exact same thing.
Yeah, you got to figure it out. Well, listen.
So I have no problem. All I do is work overtime every day. So
we're seeing an increase in the SALT tax cap. right? So the salt tax cap, and these are high tax states. It benefits people in the high tax blue states where we get to write off our property taxes and state income taxes. Now, I live on Long Island. I'm one of the highest property taxes in the country in my area. We pay the highest electricity rates. We have very high cost of living. And so now they're upping the salt cap tax from $10,000 to $40,000. And a lot of Republicans are against this. They're like, why should we fund the blue states? Why should we help the people in the blue states? They're not like they vote for us. They continue to vote for policies and the overspending in their states. Well, listen, I'm not going to lie. I'm not one of those public virtue signalers out there that say one thing, do the other. It's in my self-interest if the salt tax cap gets increased,
Yeah.
right? I want to see it. And I'm good with 30,000. That takes care of what I pay in property taxes and state income taxes. So if it gets increased, we operate on self-interest. That's just human nature. That's how human beings are. Once again, it's my money that I'm paying into the system. I deserve some benefit of that. Another thing the big, beautiful bill that does that's good is border security. It increases the number of judges. We need judges so that we could expedite deportations, removals from the United States. It funds the border wall so it actually could be fully built, and that's a good thing. It increases ICE agents. Another good thing about the bill is that it puts in work requirements for those on Medicaid and food
Love
stamps.
this part.
SNAP,
Yes.
right?
So
we're talking able-bodied Americans.
Right.
Okay?
So if I can ask this work order, and I'm sorry to just interject here, but I listened to this, and so my understanding of work order is you're an able-bodied 30-year-old mook that sits in his mother's basement and you collect food stamps. This work order now is going to basically, we're either going to cut off your food stamps or you're going to go to work, right? Like what's this work order that is being introduced?
So basically, if you are an able-bodied individual, you go to work and you're going to receive prorated SNAP benefits and Medicaid benefits. It's not going to just be this 100% entitlement program that you're just going to get. You're going to have to work to earn it. And so the government will offset, let's just say you get, I don't know, what's the minimum wage in New York? The minimum wage is like $16, $17.
Yeah, something like $15 some, yeah.
So I don't know what the poverty level is in New York, but if you're working and you're under the poverty level, well, you'll still get 100% of your benefits, the Medicaid benefits and the food stamp benefits. If you're above poverty level, well, your benefit's going to be slightly reduced, but you'll still be able to qualify for some because you are working, and we're going to encourage you to work. And the more that you work, the theory goes that as your income goes up, you're going to need less dependency on the government system. And everyone knows that there's people out there that totally abuse these, that there's people that are not disabled that are collecting Medicaid. They're not poor. They're not in poverty. They may be working off the books. And so they don't report these are all income-based programs. Now, I remember distinctly when you had sensible Democrats in the 1990s, Bill Clinton giving his State of the Union address saying the era of big government is over. And Bill Clinton was able to work with Newt Gingrich in the House of Representatives, and they actually pushed through welfare to work programs. Well, this is a return to that. And it's a beneficial program. First of all, I don't mind taking care of a person that's truly disabled. I believe we should take care of those people. I believe in the social safety nets. I do have a heart. I don't mind helping out the single mother that's working 2 jobs, trying to raise their kids and is trying to be involved in them. I'd rather that single mother work 1 job and actually be there for their children, steer their children in the right direction. And what people need to realize is that when you have those that are taking advantage of the system, there's limited money in the pot. So the more people that are applying to these programs, the less of a benefit those that are truly in need are going to get. And so this is a way to try and prevent that from happening. And those are the good aspects of the bill. There are a few more, but those are the main points of the good parts of the bill. But then there's the bad parts of the bill. And I think that the bad parts are actually terrible. Every single government agency is getting funding increases, including those agencies that have routinely abused their power, including the agencies that weaponize the system to target the sitting president of the United States, to target ordinary Americans, to target political opponents of the United States. And I think to me that's a travesty. Why should agencies that abuse their power receive funding increases? The reality is that they should actually be defunded. They should have their funding cut. Some of these agencies should be dismantled. They shouldn't even exist anymore. That's how bad they've become. And I'm not satisfied with the excuse. Well, we're going to tackle that later on. You know,
So-
we're going to tackle that
Yeah.
in the future
Now's
spending
not
bill.
the time.
Spend
Yeah.
more now to
Can I-
you know, so we'll have the money later.
Can I
Yeah.
stop you right there? Right. So I view that as now people respond to their incentives, and Donald Trump is a very ego-driven person. Now those agencies did target him directly. Now coming out of the election, also I viewed it as he won with a mandate. He said all the right things after. Why do you think he seems not interested in going after those things? I view it as you have a mandate. I understand that the GOP sucks. A lot of them are rhinos. They're not going to want to go and do this themselves. But why can't you apply the pressure of this coalition you had behind you onto all of those guys? And we're in a fucking primary, all of you, if you don't start doing things that are the right thing to do. Instead, you've seen him go after a guy like Thomas Massey and say that he's a grandstander, he doesn't know how government works, etc. Like, what is that? Why do you think that that's happening? Or it's
He's not
happening that way?
necessarily wrong about Thomas Massey. And listen, I'm a big fan, not necessarily of Massey, of Rand Paul. I'm someone that respects Senator Rand Paul. But here's the problem with them. They don't really propose any realistic alternative. All right. I'm a conservative. And so I represent about maybe 30% of the actual Republican Party. I understand that I'm not going to get my way on all the
Sure,
issues.
I agree, right? I didn't expect Trump to come in and do like a Javier Milei style demolition of the.
That's what I wanted.
That's what I wanted, but it's not what I expected. What I kind of liked was like Doge. I'm like, okay, the idea that we're going to spend $6 trillion and we're going to have a revenue of $4 trillion, and then Doge is going to come in and try and cut $2 trillion to make up that difference so we could balance. I was like, wow, that's great. Now, as a libertarian, I want to go into no government in a sense, but I'm like, that's amazing. We're gonna like try to balance the budget. That's a great. We're not getting any of that. So just
well, Skaggs, I mean, you just brought up something critically important, right? So Doge wanted to take a $6.8 trillion budget and bring it back down to $4.8 trillion.
Yes.
So prior to the coronavirus,
Yes.
our budget was $4.8 trillion. That's what we were spending, and we were taking in about $3.8 trillion in revenue. Coronavirus happens and federal spending just explodes. You know,
Right.
stimulus after stimulus after stimulus. All these agencies, they get beefed up. CDC, NIH, all of them. And so the budget balloons. It swells to $6.8 trillion. We are now what? I mean, to me, we've been removed from COVID since 2020 when it first started. It
I
was
even thought
all
it.
bullshit. to begin
March 2020. Yeah.
with. Yeah, that's when it ended for me.
well, they're floating out the idea of a new variant that's dangerous again.
Yeah. Good for them.
So why haven't we gone back to a pre-COVID budget? We're spending at emergency levels when there is no emergency, there is no crisis. And that to me is a really big problem. Like, it really shouldn't be that hard to cut all these agencies and departments. And this is what is frustrating to people like us that are actually concerned about these things, because we see the writings on the wall. So I'll go back to the Biden administration for a second. The Biden administration, along with some Republicans that joined with Democrats to craft a bipartisan $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. That was passed in 2021 or 2022. Here we are now, 3 or 4 years later, and we're seeing radars go down at Newark Airport. They're having the blackouts over there. We're seeing planes almost clip each other on runways. We have computers that the FAA is using that run on floppy disks, where if a part breaks on those computers, they actually have to go to eBay because no company makes those parts anymore. Where the hell did the $1.2 trillion go? Now, I did a whole episode back then on it, and I explained how only 25% or 30% of the actual $1.2 trillion goes to real infrastructure, what we would consider real infrastructure. Instead, a lot of that money went into racist roads, creating safe streets, like all this BS fluff nonsense.
Black Man Boulevard, yeah.
Far left groups and special interest groups. But that's where the American people should be outraged. Like, if we create a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, well, we shouldn't have an FAA that has to go to eBay to get parts. We shouldn't have an FAA that's using copper wiring rather than fiber optic cables that have been around, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years. How long has fiber optic been out? It's not like it's the newest technology. I remember when Verizon Fios was dropping the lines 25 years ago. And so this is the problem within government. And when it comes to people like Thomas Massie, who, again, I do respect to a certain degree, but he doesn't provide any real alternative, no realistic solutions to the problems. And if you don't do anything, well, then what comes down the pike is worse. So the perfect example, 2017, Trump comes into office and he's talking immigration and he wants to get the wall funding. And so he's talking about immigration reform. And then the idea of DACA came about. You know, what do you do with all the kids that came when they were like 6 months old? Now they're 18 years old. And do you offer them some type of legal status? And Republicans balked. They said, no, that's amnesty. You can't do that, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's look at it. Let's look at what happened. So when it comes to DACA, and I'm not someone that, you know, likes illegal immigration. I don't support it. I support the idea of mass deportation. But when it comes to DACA, you could have boxed every single Democrat into a corner by putting that up for a vote. You put it in one bill with all the border enforcement, with the border wall and the funding for the border wall, and now put Democrats and make them go on record saying, no, we're not going to support the DACA kids. We're not going to vote for that. And when I say grant them legal status, I'm not talking about citizenship. They could have legal status without citizenship, where they have to pay taxes, they have to pay fines, but they can't vote in elections. They can't, you know, do ordinary things that U.S. citizens could do. In any event, Republicans balked at the idea. Well, how did the alternative work out?
Yeah, we got flooded.
Let's be honest. So if Trump would have gotten that border wall finished in 2020 and 2017 when he came in, if he would have gotten the bill passed and you would have had, you know, all right, so we legalized, you know, 4 million DACA kids that were here. Well, then would we have seen the flood of 15 million people under the Biden administration? And that's where Republicans, they don't know how to play the game. So Thomas Massie hates the idea of SALT, the state and local taxes that we get to write off that benefit people in blue states. Well, I understand he doesn't like it. But guess what? I don't like paying someone's flood insurance that I'm subsidizing halfway across the country because they're in the FEMA flood zone.
Like when there's
so
a hurricane
I don't
in
have
Florida, right?
Yeah. But
or just California, they're going to lose all their insurance soon.
Well, but why should people that don't have children subsidize education then?
Right.
Why should they subsidize the child tax credit?
He'd probably agree with you on these points, though, Thomas Massie.
He's against the SALT tax, and that's my point.
Sure.
The whole thing is, well, put the SALT tax in there and make Democrats vote. So every Democrat in blue states voted against the SALT tax cap increase. Well, now you just cut Republicans' campaign ads for 2026 in midterm elections. Like that's brilliant. But again, Thomas Massie says, I can't support the bill because it has SALT. And he had other problems with the bill that I did.
Sure.
Okay, don't get me wrong. But it's stuff like that. Like, create better solutions then. Put out a roadmap. But what really annoys me about this...
Sorry to cut you off. I could show you one quick. He tweeted this before. I said, hear me out. SCOTUS ruled years ago that the line item veto is unconstitutional. But if Speaker Johnson brings separate spending bills to the floor instead of an omnibus credit continuing resolution, Trump can veto any of them individually. This would give Trump flexibility without shutdown scare. I think sometimes Massie's point is like procedural, like the way just the procedure in of itself is like crooked, right? Like they're doing it this way, you know, we can't get things that we want or everything. It's all or nothing.
Well, it is crooked in a way because let's be honest. Do you guys know the last time we actually passed the budget of the United States
90s,
with normal?
Didn't you say 97?
97?
I think I heard it on your podcast. 97.
1997 was the last time we passed a budget in normal order. So what normally happens in the United States, what's supposed to happen, congressionally mandated, constitutionally, 12 budget bills get introduced. for each cabinet level department. Now, some of the departments are combined in these budget bills. So it's education, health and human services, and they get combined. Labor gets combined with them. So it's 12 bills that have to go through each committee, and the committee will debate it. The defense committee will debate the spending for the Defense Department, and it has to pass out of each committee. Then it's got to pass through the House, then get through the Senate. We haven't done normal budgeting procedures since 1997. That is insane. Insane. It's been all these omnibus bills. It's been the big, beautiful bill going through a reconciliation process. Now, I understand the reasoning why Republicans are using the reconciliation process, and it is because of the Senate. In the United States Senate, you need 60 votes to get anything done. You have to have something that could prevent a filibuster. So 60 votes is the threshold. Well, Republicans only have 53 seats. Democrats are not going to support most of the Republican measures that are coming out. Even through negotiation and compromise, Democrats are going to be hardline. We're not supporting this. You may be able to bring over one or two of them. And so they figure, Republicans are figuring, they're making the calculation, let's get this one big, beautiful bill through the reconciliation process so at least we could codify the tax cuts in place. And they're not necessarily wrong about that. See, the logic that I think Trump is going with, that's why he's going down the road of reconciliation.
Okay. This is what I want to get out of you. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
The logic he's using is, let's get all this through reconciliation as far as the tax cuts and Medicaid work requirements, SNAP work requirements, because that will drive the economy. That's going to spark economic growth. Trump is of the belief that you don't necessarily have to reduce spending in order to solve the United States national debt problem, that if you spur economic growth, that can actually solve. And he's not wrong with that to a certain degree. But at the same time, we're talking a $36.7 trillion debt. They're talking about $1 trillion in interest on that debt per year. And what most people don't know, in about 5 months, $9 trillion of that debt is coming due that the United States has to pay. And this is where it gets dangerous. That $9 trillion we acquired when the interest rates were at 0%. Well, now the interest rates for the government are going to be at 2 or 3%. Imagine 3% interest on $9 trillion.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to get 0.01% interest on $9 trillion. As
0.0001.
Yeah, right. Now, again, I understand this concept, right? This is what I was trying to share before, too. This is also kind of what Elon said. Now Elon's leaving Doge, and Elon sounds kind of defeated, I'll be honest with you. He said, I've come to perhaps the obvious conclusion that accelerating GDP growth is essential. Doge has and will do great work to postpone the day of bankruptcy in America, but the profligacy of government means that only radical improvements in productivity can save our country. Now, again, I understand this concept. They think that we can outgrow the debt and the spending levels. Do you think that is actually possible, given this is the largest spending of human history, the largest government in human history, largest amount of spending in human history? Is it possible for America to outgrow that?
Yes, it is. I'm not someone that wants to go down that road and test it. Okay, I prefer the cutting of government, because I think that's the easiest solution, right?
Why can't we do both? Yeah.
I believe you could cut government by 50%. Nobody would notice a difference. Nobody would really bat an eye. You have all these fearmongers out there saying, well, if you cut 50% from the government supports all these private industries and blah, 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 and it's going to lead to mass layoffs and blah. I will guarantee you, they always operate on fear, but I will guarantee you that if you severely cut government, that a lot of people won't notice a difference. And yes, there will be some people impacted by it. I'm not saying that there won't be. Obviously, government workers are going to have to be laid off. But we don't even know how many federal entities exist within our government. And just to put that in perspective, Senator Chuck Grassley, he was asking someone from the Government Accountability Office, and this was a few years ago, how many federal entities exist within our government? And guy couldn't answer the question. He was like, oh, I'll get back to you. And that, I understand that. But then he tried finding out and he couldn't figure it out. This is someone from the Government Accountability Office. Now, you would think, let's do a quick Google search and type in how many federal entities exist. Let's do AI. We now have AI. How many federal entities exist? And you'll get numbers. The amazing part is they'll be like, well, there's approximately between, 420 and 440 federal entities. Like
it says the U.S. federal government includes 15 cabinet departments, over 2,000 independent agencies, and various government corporations.
Yeah. You don't get any straight answers.
Right.
So Chuck Grassley commissioned
all that in 250 years.
Yeah. The National Archives, the Congressional Budget Office, Government Accountability Office, and the Federal Registrar to find out how many federal entities exist. They all come back and they all have different numbers. So nobody knows what the real answer is, because it's not even that, all right, fine. The cabinet level departments are easy, but there are so many agencies within these departments that we don't even know all the agencies that exist, because these departments have taken it upon their own statutory authority, which is constitutionally illegal. Only Congress can do it, to create new agencies within their departments. We see independent agencies that exist outside cabinet level departments. We have regulatory commissions. We have quasi-government entities like the Federal Reserve that nobody knows what it does. When you look at all these different entities, nobody can pinpoint an exact number. Well, to me, that highlights what exactly the problem is. If we don't know, if I can't do a quick Google search and get an exact number of how many federal entities exist within the government, that itself is the problem. So I think that you cut the government. As far as growth goes, what Elon Musk is now saying, like, yeah, I want to cut, but fighting the swamp is pretty difficult.
Yeah. So just real quick, is that even like a winning message to run on in the future? That is such a black pill to me, that he came in there with such high hopes. I loved it at the beginning, the 2 trillion. And now he's like, we're just gonna have to outgrow it. Oh no.
Yeah.
Are you gonna, is that what you're selling us?
If I could step in, it sounds like he came in with this great idea and they had all this steam, and now he's like, I better separate myself from this. Like, I got to get out while I still can.
Not
well, look at
criticizing
how
him
they
either. I think
beat
he
him
tried his
down.
best. Yeah.
I mean, just look at how they beat him down, and that's what the swamp does to you. Now, understand that the swamp, it's like a seek and destroy mission. When you go to touch their funding, well, that's their livelihood right there, right? I mean, so take something like the Department of Homeland Security, the newest cabinet level department in 2003. Now, emergency management made my career, Homeland Security, right? That's where I got my start. Not in the Department of Homeland Security. I got my start here in New York State within Homeland Security and emergency management. It was a great, rewarding, fulfilling career, and we did a lot of good. But when we started to build out this huge surveillance state apparatus, first with the Patriot Act and the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, well, I warned. And when the Patriot Act passed, I was a college student. And I'm a conservative. I believe in limited government. And I warned, we better be careful, very careful about the road we're going down, because the powers we're granting to government could easily be used against us. And obviously that's been proven right. But here's the kicker to it. The Department of Homeland Security was created based on the threat, right? I mean, that Al-Qaeda has the capabilities to attack us, as they demonstrated with 9/11 and blah, blah, blah. And you have these international terrorist organizations that represent a threat. Well, what happens when they're no longer a threat? I mean, think about that logically. If I'm not saying that Al-Qaeda isn't a threat. They certainly are. I've studied Al-Qaeda. I know them in and out. I know them very well. They're actually a sophisticated, patient organization. I worry about Al-Qaeda much more than I worry about a group like ISIS. But let's just be honest here. If the Homeland Security came out tomorrow and said, all right, we no longer have the threat of Islamic terrorism. Well, okay, so then why are we funding you?
Close up shop.
Well,
why do we need a Department of Home? So it's in their interest.
Even what we were saying before about the COVID spending, we can't even undo the COVID spending.
Correct.
Right. So that's about Al-Qaeda and the Patriot Act.
Well, but the point is, if you look at how that morphed, okay, so we were going after Islamic terrorism, right?
Yeah.
And then we started to make significant gains. We killed off all the top leadership. We started to hamper their ability to really conduct attacks against the United States on U.S. soil. They still operate throughout the Middle East, and they could conduct some attacks in Europe, but we made it very difficult for them in the United States. Well, now that we didn't have the threat of Islamic terrorism, well, now we got to look at parents at school board meetings. Now we got to look at those Catholic people.
Yeah, Russia. Yeah,
and
white guys who work out at
the
gyms.
amorphous idea of white supremacy in the United States. The greatest threat that the United States faces. That when was the last time a terror attack, and I'm talking a real terror attack, was conducted by a white supremacist? When?
Right.
Yeah. And it was just made up. But you have to make up the threat to keep the beast going. So that's what you see. Now, Elon Musk is defeated. Okay. He's demoralized. He didn't realize how brutal, how cutthroat politics is, but he should have, right? All we have to do is go back to Julius Caesar. I always use that because it's the perfect example. He groomed Brutus. He raised Brutus as his own son. He was grooming Brutus to be the next Caesar. And Brutus was one of the first ones to plunge a dagger into Julius Caesar's back. That's how brutal politics is. And unfortunately, Elon Musk did not realize the backlash he was going to get. And all you have to do is listen to people like Chuck Schumer, right? Chuck Schumer comes out there, the moron that he is. And he says, of course there's waste in government. Everyone knows there's waste in government. It's been happening for decades. And I've been here he didn't say I've been here for decades, but he's been there for decades. They all know it's going on. But they don't want to disrupt the apple cart. They like the gravy trains to keep on flowing. They like the money from the government coffers because it gives them power and influence. And that's why it's so hard to dismantle it. We have had so many commissions through Congress on federal debt and spending, and none of the recommendations have ever been adopted. But we have to get a handle on it.
So how do we get through this? Because it's just a giant black. Yeah, Skaggs and our buddy Garrett,
Blackfield, Professor J. My goodness.
Yeah. Talking. I talk nonstop about how I want an underground kingdom in a mountain, but now being in a mountain's not enough. The mountain now needs to be on an island, and we need to be under the island. We can't get far enough. The moon's next, but
we're gonna have to go to Mars with Elon. I saw the Babylon Bee posted today, actually a great one.
Oh yeah, that was very funny.
Elon finds fixing government too difficult. We'll resume mission to send humans to Mars. It's much easier, or something like that. Yeah,
it'll be easier to get people to Mars than it will be to cut government spending.
Because this is such a giant black pill. How do we get through this? That people like Schumer can joke about government waste, and then we got one of the smartest inventors of our time trying to get his hands wet in the government pool, and in 130 days, like he's out.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Elon is, for all intents and purposes, one of the most intelligent people we've had come along in a long time. He might not be the smartest, but better, he's smarter than us. Like, where do we go from here?
Chuck Schumer.
Yeah, where do we go from here? Because we had Elon, he's dropping out. We got Cash and
Elon
Bongino.
Is not necessarily dropping out. So just to make the record clear, it's not like Elon's being forced out.
No, I understand he's not.
He was a special appointment, so he only has something like 125 days that he's allowed to operate
otherwise, right?
As a special appointment. Otherwise, he's got to be put as a permanent appointment. And then he has to go through Congress, and it's
and he doesn't want that.
And since Doge is not a government agency, an official government agency, it creates an enormous problem. Now, Doge is slated to remain until 2026, and Doge has done enough. Now, Republicans, I'm not saying they will do this, but Republicans have stated that within the next couple of weeks, they're introducing bills
next week,
to codify the Doge cuts.
It was only $9 billion.
And Doge has been able to come in and actually make upgrades to certain government systems, which has been beneficial and is going to save us money. They've also introduced AI into some of these systems that's going to be able to identify when people are trying to access government programs and it's fraudulent. So good things have happened. I don't want to make it like it's just, the government, it's all doom and gloom.
I don't disagree. It's just, I just don't, we got these superstars, 5 years ago, 4 years ago during the Biden administration, you looked at people like Kash Patel and like Elon Musk buying up X, and they were these superstars. And, we knew we couldn't wait to get Trump back in. And now here we are, and we're in, the beginning stages, or even if you want to say the middle of it. And we're just getting blackpilled left and right.
Do you think just fundamentally fixing this problem is a sense out of
Yeah.
reach. Can't be.
We just got to burn it down. Like, what do we do?
No, I
federal
think that
government's a
everyone
runaway train.
underestimates how powerful the bureaucracy is.
Who underestimates?
Everyone.
Okay.
Everyone in this country underestimates how powerful the bureaucracy has become. I mean, when we examine it, I mean, let's not pretend the bureaucracy tried to take down a sitting president when Trump first came into office in 2017.
That's what makes it even more crazy to me. He's been personally targeted. I mean, people, he was almost killed twice. How much more invested could you be in fighting back against these people than Donald Trump is? And it seems like it is out of reach.
Nobody's in cuffs.
Well, nobody's saying what's really happening out loud. And it's something that I actually say and I speak about, that the bureaucracy has emerged as the fourth branch of government, that the bureaucracy as the fourth branch of government is beholden to no one. There are no checks and balances on it. They operate outside the legislative branch and the executive branch. And the bureaucracy essentially has more power than a president of the United States. Just look at President Biden. He wasn't in charge. I mean,
you mean President Autopen?
Yeah. Now you have all these frauds that were in the Biden administration in the media writing books, tell-all books about how bad President Biden really was. And they're enriching themselves. That was the largest conspiracy and cover-up in American history, that they allowed someone that was in cognitive decline, was not really functional, to be the president of the United States. And to me, it shows you that the bureaucracy doesn't care. And part of the problem is that the American people don't care either. I mean, think about it. Like, have you run into any Democrats that are really angry? And I'm talking about really angry and upset that they were lied to, they were deceived, and they were manipulated about Biden. Because every Democrat I spoke to said, well, Biden's no longer president. It doesn't matter anymore. And it's like, well, no, it really does matter what took place. I mean, that makes Watergate look like nothing.
I find that so funny. Not only are they not mad about those things, but the things I do find they are mad about are so ironic and funny. I've seen a lot of them be mad about this bill, saying they're slashing everything. They're slashing everything. I'm like, no, dude, they're growing the size of government. You love growing the size of government. But you're somehow mad about the fact that they're growing the size of government. Like, you're so lost. A lot of these
I don't think there's ever a point where they turn back and admit that, like, they were played or they were wrong.
I wish Trump was slashing everything the way you think he was.
Not for nothing. I'm sorry. If the Republicans lie to me time and time again,
wouldn't be a Republican anymore.
I would just be like, F you at some point. There comes a point where
are we there yet, though? I mean, come on now.
No.
Where are we at now?
Yeah.
This is why I'm not a Republican.
Well, we are to a certain degree. Republicans will speak out against their own, right? Republicans will attack their own. They'll criticize their own. That's part of the Republicans' problem, that they'll constantly talk to each other and call each other out when they won't even take that attitude with Democrats. They won't call Democrats out. So when you look at Republicans, I think that those that are registered Republican are actually there's many more that will hold their politicians accountable compared to Democrats. Don't get me wrong. There are some people that are dying the wolves. They'll support whatever Trump does.
They're called boomers. They're called boomers.
I'll sit there. I'll criticize. I support Trump. I don't think it's any secret. I voted for Trump over Kamala Harris. I voted for Trump over Hillary Clinton. I support him. But when he's doing something I don't like, I will criticize him. And I don't see how hard that is.
I make this point all the time. A few of these Democratic people that I speak to, a while back, I remember I said, they brought something to my attention that the state of New York was doing. And I was like, I moved to Connecticut. I love that I was born and raised and grew up in New York. In that sense, it's great. But what the state has become is a hellhole. And I don't want to go back, and I could care less what happens to the state. Sorry, you live there and you're stuck on that island, which is even worse, in my opinion. There's no escape. And they were like, oh, but your boy,
the island is red, my friend.
Yeah. You guys in Staten Island will be all right.
Long Island, not Staten Island.
Well, Staten Island
red too, though.
Yes, they're both. I said you guys in Staten Island, and so they were like, "Oh, your boy Trump is from New York." I was like, that means nothing to me.
point,
Just because
right.
I support Trump doesn't mean I got to support where he's from. Like, I'm interested in fixing the country, not red team and blue team here.
Right.
And most of the people on the left are just here to play for the blue team. And it's almost to, I mean, it's past the scary point at this point.
Yeah, I do think the best maybe thing that has occurred, Cap, is like we're saying, we've said the last couple of years, is that like those people have kind of been dismissed or somewhat out of the conversation now. The rest of us here on like the right, at least now can have like adult conversations about things and disagree, and hopefully in I don't know 150 years maybe that'll amount to something positive.
It's funny to see that like now. Any Democrat that's on the campaign trails trying to be more masculine and talk to the white man and,
the shift
they're trying to be more moderate, but it's the most unnatural. Yes, it's so unnatural.
I know they sent Pete Buttigieg. Yeah.
He's trying to grow his little patchy beard, and David Hogg's like, well, guys just want to get laid. Yeah.
It's the stupidest thing that I've ever seen what they do. I never thought I would say, if you told me in 2022 that John Fetterman would become the voice of reason for the Democrat Party, I would be like, you're smoking crack. But yet that's where we're at, right? And look at how Fetterman is being savaged. I've seen article after article questioning Fetterman's health. He's not healthy enough to be in This is a guy that had a severe stroke when he was first elected into the Senate. He couldn't even read normally. He couldn't speak normally. And Democrats were like, oh, he's fine. He's fine. This is the same Democrat Party that kept Dianne Feinstein in the Senate, knowing that she had full-blown Alzheimer's disease, had no idea where the hell she was, yet they kept her in the Senate so that they could keep her vote. And it really shows you the lens they'll go to. But listen, sooner or later, normalcy will come back. And what I mean by that is it's either going to be through smart policy or it's going to be by force. And when I say by force, I'm not talking like revolution or anything. We either make cuts to the government now, 20, 25%, and we'll feel some pain. We'll feel a little pinch, but we'll be fine overall. Or we wait and we kick the can down the road. And in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, the whole house of cards is going to collapse. Then it's not going to be about let's cut programs. Then it's going to be we need to gut entire programs. And that's going to be the reality. The silver lining in all this, where I'll get back to Elon Musk. See, I did the Trump weave throughout this whole thing. Where I'll get back to Elon Musk with his idea of economic growth. I'm actually releasing an episode on this probably next week. But just over the course of the last several months, the United States has found some of the largest lithium deposits here in the United States on the West Coast. We found some of the highest grade neodymium deposits here in the United States. We have an enormous amount of hydrogen deposits that we just found. Like I keep on reading, we have one of the largest gold deposits that we just found. So when you're looking at it, the United States, all real estate alone, has hundreds of trillions of dollars, or whatever goes above a trillion. Arkansas has one of the largest lithium formations in the entire world. It's Arkansas. I mean, think about it. Think about how that could transform the state. So when you look at it, there are things, but you need to be able to exploit these resources, right? And that's where Democrats have actually constantly hamstrung. Like it shouldn't take 10 years to get freaking permits to exploit resources so the country can make money. I understand we want to do things in an environmentally clean way. Listen, I don't want to drink poisoned water or anything like that. But at the same time, I don't care about some stupid little fish somewhere. If the fish has to go, it's natural selection.
So I'm just thinking of this now. Okay, I understand. So in a sense, I guess you could say the Trump idea at this point is we just have to outgrow this problem that we have because we can't fundamentally fix the problem. However,
we can fix it if we had the will to fix it.
Right, but we don't. Or at least they don't. I mean, like maybe the three of us here understand what needs to be done, but we're not in charge, right? We don't have.
So let's take over the country and fix it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. You lead us, Professor G. But anyway, the point I was trying to get is, as you were saying all this stuff, is but that's directly in conflict with like the AOC Green New Deal put restrictions on our productivity. Right. So this is actually very dangerous because if those people are to regain power and you've now sold everyone, the only way we can fix this problem is if we outgrow it. But then you have degrowth people take charge after. I again, like there.
Yeah,
Time is
this
of
all
the
has to be done in
essence here.
3.5 years.
Time
Yeah.
is of the essence here.
Well,
and-
this is where it's not about Trump. And I want to make that clear to everyone. You know, too many people are putting all their hopes in Trump. Trump's one person in a moment of time. He's there for 3.5 years. All his executive I'm not a fan of executive orders. I don't like executive orders. But some of his executive orders are good. I'm not going to lie. They're policies I support, but it's a Band-Aid. Because as we've seen
Right.
before,
Mhm.
whatever
next
one
guy.
president does through executive order,
Gonna
next
rent out a
president
stadium
undoes.
like he did and fucking have a whole day of signing on, executive orders undoing the other guys.
Exactly. And so what the Republicans need to do, and this is where the pressure needs to be applied, Republicans have to friggin' pass legislation. Republicans in Congress actually have to bring Congress back to where it used to be. There's a reason that Article 1 of the United States Constitution is the longest article of the entire we have 7 articles. Article 1 has 10 sections. Every other article after that has 4 or less sections. The reason that Congress has the most checks and balances, the reason that Congress is the first part of the Constitution is because the founding fathers wanted the power to be concentrated in the hands of the many as opposed to the hands of the few. And so Congress has to reestablish themselves. For far too long, Congress has deferred to presidents to make decisions because members of Congress want to get reelected. So they don't want to take votes on controversial issues that could be used as a campaign ad against them. Congress needs to start passing laws. And I'm not talking about laws that restrict us. I'm talking about laws that restrict government itself, that restrict the executive branch, that begin to limit the power of the departments and agencies that have emerged as the fourth branch of government, to take back the statutory authority and say, we didn't say that you could build out these agencies in your department, and therefore we're stripping the funding from these agencies. Congress has to step up to the plate. Republicans in Congress need to start codifying these things because once they're codified, then it doesn't matter what AOC says.
Sure.
Because once you pass legislation putting restrictions on government agencies and departments, it's very difficult that another Congress is going to undo that. Sure, it can happen, but it's much easier to undo an executive order than it is to undo a piece of congressional legislation.
So to play devil's advocate here, though, I understand what you're saying. Congress needs to step up to the plate and create these new laws and codify them. But we also were just talking about how the bureaucracy is so powerful that like Elon was even blindsided by it. So how do we create these new laws, or, how does Congress go about this while the bureaucracy is right there?
Or how about this? Again,
you need people with balls.
Yeah.
I'm just putting it bluntly.
I want to pin you down on this one, Professor Giordano, right? Again, I view it as the best way to do that is to put pressure on them by primary challenges. And one of the ways that can be done is Trump using like that whole vibe, that whole energy that he has behind him, the MAGA, the hats, all that shit. Fuck these people, primary them because they're not doing the right thing to do. But that's not what's happening. Like, why is that not the strategy, or at least being floated out as a strategy? Seems like the strategy is to just work with these people who suck and middle along the way.
Well, two reasons why. I think that one reason why is because right now he's still in the first year of his second term, and he still has the potential to get a lot done. And so he doesn't want to alienate Republicans in Congress.
But they should be alienated, in my opinion. All right, but sorry to cut you off.
Oh, that's okay.
Frustrated here.
It's not radical enough.
Yeah.
But the second thing is that strategy has been tried before. The problem is you actually have to put up good candidates to primary people.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so when we look, and I think that the Tea Party is a good example. Like the Tea Party was actually really good movement. It grew rapidly. People supported it. But then you started to have these loons, primary establishment officials, and they would say stupid things like, the one that believed in a witch, the Christine O'Donnell one from Maryland or something. The Sharon Angle over in Vegas and Nevada.
Sure.
You put up really terrible candidates to primary, and it was just a complete failure.
I'm familiar with this problem better than anybody. This is the crux of the Libertarian Party's problem. It's there is no one. There is no. All the good people don't want
Gary
to do
Johnson.
Right. Well, and all the actual good ones don't want to do it. right? So there is no one, and it becomes a joke. Yeah.
Well, and now you're going to have even less people want to do it. They're going to be like, oh, look at what happened to Elon Musk. And that's a guy that's a multi-billionaire. I don't want to get that type of treatment. I mean, listen, first of all, I just want to make it clear. I have no interest in running for office.
I was just going to say, Professor, you got to run, at least for Long Island's sake.
I make a good living. I love being in the classroom. I think I do more good at being in the classroom than I do being a politician and whatnot. But let's just say I was thinking about running. Why would I want to run when I got a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old that has to see all the shit that goes on, that has to deal with the accusation, the attacks? I mean, in this day and age, people that will show up at your house and they'll dox you, you know. So you have a lot of good people that actually steer away from politics because they don't want to do it. And now when you see what happened to Elon Musk and the burning of Teslas and the attacks on him, and it really is disgusting. And unfortunately, there are too many good people that are so qualified to do the job. But they're never going to run because they don't want to go through that. They don't need to go through that because they can raise their families. They make good livings. And that's why we have politicians in office and we don't have statesmen. Okay. Our founding fathers were ordinary people that rose to the occasion. They were statesmen. They weren't extraordinary. They were flawed, but they became statesmen because they had courage and they understood that they needed to temper the people's expectations about what they can possibly do and what they can't do. In this day and age, that's what we need more of. We need more statesmen, but it's very difficult to get enough statesmen into office. There are a few, but it's very difficult to get enough that makes a difference. But again, sooner or later, you either make the reforms now or you're going to be forced to make the reforms down the road. And it's going to be really ugly because let's face it, anyone that thinks that the United States is just going to exist for an indefinite period of time, you're delusional. You're smoking Hunter Biden.
A lot of people think that, though. A lot of people have never thought any other possibility.
Yeah. Well, history has shown us, though, right? That there's not a single government that exists today that has existed throughout history. So sooner or later, this American experiment is going to collapse. The founding fathers did what they could. And they said the people are the ones that have to be the watchdog over this system. That as government expands, liberty contracts. Knowledge is the best guardian for liberty. And so we have to equip ourselves. Well, the American people disengaged from the political process. Schools stopped teaching civic education about the founding fathers and what the intent is and the principles of limited government. And so what's happened? Well, the second something goes wrong in society, people look to the government to solve the problem. Government expands, government grows bigger because they're responding to the people. And before you know it, you're going to end up in a dictatorship.
That's the clip right there, Skaggs. Holy shit. That was well put.
Yeah. I also feel like I even feel burnt out myself at this point. Like, damn it, we put together a really good attempt and it just seems like it's going to come up short. What's the point of all this complaining every week on the show
it's not
about
over,
it?
Though. I mean, come on.
I'd rather just review whiskey and watch wrestling.
I just told you that we're going to be a dictatorship, but don't be so pessimistic.
Yeah, sorry. It's just, that's just the way I'm feeling. Let's before we wrap it up, can I change gears real quick? I just want to ask you one completely different question about the Ukraine. So obviously, now I didn't think Trump was actually going to be able to negotiate a peace within one day, like you said he did. Do you think that it's been so difficult because, from Putin's point of view, he is also assessing this entire mess over here the same way that we are, and he's like, I'm going to make peace with Trump in a day, and then what? He's out of office, and the whole problem hasn't been fundamentally fixed over there.
Yeah,
and then they're going to put their sights back on me again as soon as he's out of office, and we're back to square one. What do you think's going on over there?
That's a tough question because it's
a broad question, but yeah.
Well, it's hard to say. It's hard to get into the mind of Vladimir Putin.
Sure.
Okay, he's someone that's very calculated. He's someone that every word he speaks, there's a reason behind it. Every action he takes, there's a reason behind it.
I missed a little context. The context being there's been like a little ramp up in hostilities the past couple days, even an attack on his life, a lot of just drone attacks. So Trump was also mad at him about it. And I'm trying to put myself in his shoes. I'm like, well, if I'm feeling black-pilled over our ability to fix things here than perhaps he is as well. And that's
You know,
maybe why he's taking action the way he is.
it's funny that you brought this up because I was thinking something similar just this past week, like reading what's been going on. I didn't expect it to be like a one-day peace deal like Trump made it out to be, but also at the same time, literally everyone outside of like Trump and Trump's cabinet is trying to prolong this war. From globally, they are trying to sabotage all forms of peace to keep this money laundering scheme going, to keep us at war. I kind of feel like that's more of the there is so like it's not just like the deep state here in America, it's like the globalist regime of the world causing more sabotage than we could create good.
Well, I think that this is actually the biggest problem that Trump faces, because President Trump, he came in as the great negotiator. He campaigned, I'm going to stop the war in Ukraine. I'm going to stop the bloodshed. And so if he's unable to do it, it is going to make him look weak in the eyes of the international community. And I think that maybe Putin is looking at the American political system saying he's only got 3.5 years. We could wait him out. But I think that's the wrong approach. And I think Trump's taken the wrong approach as well. If it was me, and again, this is just me speaking, if it was me, I would now turn my attention towards Putin and I would just threaten the shit out of him. I would say, listen to me. You are going to come to the negotiation table. You are going to make a deal. You will get some concessions in this deal. We will recognize Crimea. We'll drop the sanctions. But mark my words, if you want to play games and you're not willing to negotiate an end to this war, we are going to arm the Ukrainians to the teeth, and we are going to make life living hell for you inside Ukraine. Now, you'll probably still be able to win, and you'll be able to defeat Ukraine because you're the bigger, more superior country because, the manpower, the economic resources, whatever. But I am warning you now. We will make it so difficult for you that the cost versus benefit analysis will not make sense. It will take you over 100 years before you even begin to break even in what it cost you to get into Ukraine. Do you really want to go down that road? Because we're willing to do it. And I think that's the way you need to talk to Putin at this point. Listen, as much problems as we have here in the United States, the reality is that the United States is still the global dominant power in the entire world. There is no country that matches us. People will talk about China, and yeah, China is rising. I'm not denying that. But China is a long way off from catching up to us economically, politically, militarily. We are still the dominant country. We just haven't had a president that exerts America's power and influence in the way it should be exerted. When people criticize Trump, he speaks harsher to our allies than he does our adversaries. Well, when you come into office and you call the adversaries killers right off the bat, you're not going to be able to negotiate with him. So he gave Putin the praise, right? He praised Putin, said he's a guy I could work with. Well, now Putin has proven him wrong. So now Trump needs to switch gears and go into more of a threatening type posture against Russia, become more adversarial to Russia, force Putin to the table. Because let's face it, the United States can collapse the global economy if it wanted to. I mean, nobody really understands as much economic problems as we have. Just remember, back in 2007, 2008, our real estate market collapsed. That's one sliver of our economy, and it caused a global recession. In 2017 or 2018, China, 50% of its stock market crashed, went down, 50% crashed. Did anyone feel it here? No. Okay, really, right? That shows you the power that we have. We could cut access off. If Russia can't sell its oil and natural gas, they're finished.
Do you think also maybe this Golden Dome thing has something to do with that as well? Like, hey, we're going to take the great equalizer you guys have over there. The nukes, they're going to bounce off this Golden Dome thing we have. But you guys don't have a Golden Dome, so our nukes are going to land, right? Maybe that has something to do with it.
As expensive as it is, I kind of like the idea.
But let's be honest here. First of all, if it ever escalates to that level, it doesn't matter. It's
I agree, right? So I agree. It's a flawed, right? Because if we launch all the nukes on them, it's still gonna ruin the planet.
Still crack the earth in two.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, the United States and Russia have enough nuclear bombs to literally destroy the world 23 times over. Yeah. But again, our strength. You can't pull off a full-scale invasion of the United States.
Yeah.
We can disrupt Russia in Ukraine. And that's the major difference.
Mhm.
And understand that Russia is not like America, right? The Russian government, the Russian people, they don't accept 20 years of war, nearly $2 trillion spent, thousands upon thousands of soldiers coming home in flag-draped coffins. And at the end of the day, well, the Taliban recaptures the country in a week and nobody's held accountable for it. Okay, that's America. In Russia, the accountability is if you're responsible for a military loss in Russia or a military conflict that drags out and out and out.
Men with guns are going to get in trucks and drive to the Red Square in Moscow and get rid of you.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the accountability. So Putin's back could be put against the wall. And I think that President Trump is shifting towards that direction where he has spoken out much harsher against Vladimir Putin. But again, I would go one step further. Speak to him on the phone and tell him, this is it. This is your opportunity. You're going to get an out. You're going to be able to take it to your people and say, we got what we wanted out of this. And the conflict's over. He needs to put that pressure.
All right. We'll see
Don't
how
disagree.
it plays out.
Yeah.
We'll see how it plays out. Well, Captain, any other final questions or thoughts before we sign off?
Well, I did have a question a few weeks ago, right around Trump's 100 days. Everybody gave Trump a grade, and a lot of people were disappointed. And then he did, awesome in Saudi Arabia, and got all this investment, and his approval went up. And so overall, what are you feeling his grade is right now? What as a teacher, what would you give Trump as a grade?
As a letter or number, Chris?
A letter. Let's do a letter. We did numbers.
Get the hell out of here with a number. It's hard to say because it's a multi-part exam, right? So, like, if I'm grading the border security section, well, obviously he's going to get an A+ on that.
Yeah.
I mean, border crossings are down by like 95%, so I'll give him an A+ on that. If you're talking economics, it's hard to say. I'll give him a B to B+. But it can shift to an A if his policies actually work. Like, let's be honest.
Also shift to a C and a D.
It certainly can, or an F. It certainly can. So it's hard to say. As far as foreign policy goes, I think that Middle Eastern visit was extraordinarily important. At the same time, you still have to be suspicious. It is the Middle East. This is a place where conflict has existed since the beginning of
I think
what you said about the Qatar plane was spot on. We'd have to strip that thing down to every nut and bolt that holds it together.
I think we have to all withhold judgment on the Middle East policy until the Iran thing is resolved one way or another. Like, that's the crown jewel in this whole thing, right? If we can make peace with them and get like an actual good deal in place, or if it ends up in a war, that's going to be like the final question on the exam in regards to that.
Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily because I think Iran is just a small sliver of the Middle East. I mean, think about if the Middle East goes through this great modernization program and you see that the entire transformation throughout the Middle East, they all start recognizing Israel, they all start getting along. Iran could be the outlier. So I think Iran's a small sliver. I think the broader Middle East is more important. Are you going to get rid of that radical ideology that is festered there, not just for the last 25 years, but we're talking for centuries? That will be interesting. As far as China and challenging China, obviously that's the biggest challenge that we face on the global landscape. So I don't think, as of right now, Trump's grade is an incomplete. All the assignments aren't in. He didn't finish all the tests, and I'll be happy to reassess it in 3.5 years when he's on his way out of
right.
Okay, you have to come back on that.
And we want border security. As of right now, it's an A.
Yeah,
all right.
I agree with that one. That one was that one was solved by him just
getting elected,
taking office.
Yeah,
he's done things as well, but just
that
him sitting in the chair
and those
changed
sorts
the vibe.
Of things,
yeah, that's the best way to
men out of women's sports.
Yes,
those are all the easy stuff.
Okay.
All right. Doom Nation, thank you guys for joining us. Professor Giordano, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Make sure you check him out at the P.A.S Report. That's where same places you can find us is where you can find Professor G, and that is the P.A.S Report with Professor Giordano. Thank you guys so much for listening. Skaggs, any final words?
I'm going to be playing some video games tomorrow with the friends. you want to watch that, because the politics is too frustrating all the time. So
I will not be.
Yes.
But we will be streaming or reacting to Money in the Bank next Saturday. So make sure
we're doing all these things besides politics this year.
Yeah, we're diversifying our portfolio.
Money in
we're
the
too
Bank,
black-pilled.
WWE, Money in the Bank. We're going to be live streaming as we watch Money in the Bank. It's going to be fun, goofy, silly. We like it. Yeah.
All right. Very much. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you guys for listening. We will see you next week with another episode.